All right. Hey, everybody. I can't see you, but I'm assuming you can see me. I know we got some people tuning in. Can y'all hear me okay? You've got a little chat box down there, either to my right or down below. If you could just say hello, everyone, so I know you're there. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Hey, Rudy. How you doing? All right, this is fun, guys. Well, it's 7:01, so let's kick this baby off. First off, thank you everyone for joining me. This is a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this course. Can't wait to share with you on Friday. Hey, Jonathan. Can't wait to share with you on Friday what we're going to do getting into the blues. And I'm excited about these live Q&As on Wednesday nights. As we do these, if there's ways we can improve them, I think this YouTube Live seems to be the best. Hey, Scott. Hey, Christian. YouTube Live seems to be the best way to go. And you can either, I'll send out a link every week the day before giving you it's the exclusive YouTube Live link, or you can also log into your online course, and it'll be there in the dashboard just waiting for you. And we'll go live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. throughout the course. And so we'll get in. I've got about 5 questions here so far. And if you have more questions, just put them in the chat there. But to kick things off, obviously, we've all taken music lessons probably where things just didn't make sense. Things were unclear. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of piano lessons and sometimes walked away much more confused than when I started. And so it's a huge priority to me to not only show you this music, but also make sure that it's clear, and that if there's anything that's not clear, I want you to get your money's worth and make your time worthwhile. So I want to make sure and answer any questions that you have. So especially if you have taken any kind of jazz course before or studied music theory, one thing that I've noticed is that depending on where you're coming from, if you're coming from a jazz school in New York or a jazz school in LA or a different country or whatever, there's different nomenclature and different ways to talk about this music, and different ways to explain chords. And the most important thing is that we're explaining them the same way. It's less important that we're talking about things in the most complex way, but it's like jazz musicians oftentimes say when they're playing through a tune, and maybe you've got different musicians in the same band and they're playing the tune a little bit differently, and it's like, did I play the wrong chord and you played the wrong chord? And someone always says it doesn't matter if we're right or wrong, as long as we're wrong together or right together, that's what counts. So hey, Rick. So here we go. Let's jump into a few questions. First of all, I got the same question from Rick and Pete, which is, where's the PDF of the 2 chords that I showed you in the videos? And it's up there now. If you look in the recap video, down where there's the 2 MP3 files, you'll see a PDF of week 1 chords. And I was gonna put that in there in the beginning, and I ended up waiting because what I didn't want to happen is I didn't want people to just go right to the PDF and be like, show me the chords so I can just learn them now. But I wanted to talk them through with you and show you how I arrived at those chords, and then get you to copy me on the keys. And then now you can refer back to them. So now that PDF is in there, so you can check it out on the recap video. All right, let's see. Question number 1. This is a good one. This is from Jonathan. And it says, when I try to play tab, meaning on the guitar, like guitar tablature, I'm so used to building my chords in both hands, starting with the root. You taught us to play a G chord starting with the 3rd. Do you tend to see the 3rd as a place to build most of your chords when you're playing off tab or sheet music? Since you're trying to leave room for the bass player on the root, etc., does that make sense? And then he says that it probably explains why it always sounds so square anytime I've tried to play a G6 or a G7 chord, etc. And you're right, that is why it sounds so square. It's a great question, and it's the most important thing that you'll learn during this course is when you build a chord to start with the 3rd and the 7th. And the reason that we do that is as we saw in the videos, the way that we start to find out, where the third is and the seventh is we stack our chords in thirds, and then we break them apart and we totally rearrange them, starting with the third and the seventh. If you were to, the way that I would describe it is in language, when we speak and we say a sentence, no matter what it is, like I ran to the store, there are certain words that are more important than others, and we find that if you find the most operative words of a sentence, you gain most of the meaning from those words, and then the other little articles or participles or whatever they're called, they don't mean as much. They're a little more of filler words. And so when we build chords, the third and the seventh give you the most information about those chords that you could possibly get, because typically the fifth doesn't really change. So like if you're on a G chord, your fifth is going to be D. And unless you get into a flat fifth or a sharp five, which is an altered chord, your fifth isn't going to change. It's always going to be the D. And so there's not really anything that D doesn't really tell us a whole lot. Same thing with the G. Any kind of G chord is going to have the same root. A G minor chord, a G major chord, a G altered chord, they're all going to have the same root. And so you're not really telling us any important information unless the chord is so whacked out that we can't really tell what the root is. But the way that we're building our chords is that once you put that third and seventh, you got the 13, and then you got the root maybe on top, or your bass player is playing the root. The third and seventh tells us all the key information about that chord, because those are the two notes that tend to change the most. And we're going to see that on Friday's course. But if you want to build a major chord, you use 1, 3, and 5. But a minor chord is 1, flat 3, and 5. And don't worry about remembering all this stuff. You may be following me or you may not, but you change the third to get different qualities of chords, and you also can change the seventh. And so there are 4 different possibilities between the third and the seventh. You can have a major third and a flat 7, or a minor third and a flat 7, or a major third and a major 7, or a minor third and a major 7. So that's why it's so important to start there, is because you're gonna find out 90% of what that chord is about via the third and the seventh. And then you're right, Jonathan. When you just stack chords like from the ground up, like 1, 3, 5, 7, or 1, 3, 5, 6, it does not necessarily that it sounds lame. It's great for Buddy Holly, and if you're playing rock and roll, or you're playing just a really traditional blues, that's the way that those chords tend to be built. But when people want to get into the sound of jazz and they wonder, why does jazz have just a little bit of a hipper or a more sophisticated sound? It's because we're not just stacking intervals like bricks. We're taking them and then we just kind of move them around a little bit. And rather than have to memorize every chord one at a time, if you start with the third and the seventh, or the seventh and the third, same thing, most of the work is already done for you. So it's the easiest shortcut to building a jazz chord. And I've found that really jazz musicians are the only ones that do it that way. And if you're doing it another way, you're either playing rock or pop or Mozart, or a simpler type of approach to building those chords. So great question. Here's another question. Speaking of building chords, when you're building chords and talking about scale degrees, the fifth, the seventh, etc., are you counting those scale degrees from the name of the chord you're building, or the name of the key that you're in? That's a great question too. Just to clarify, if we're in the key of G and we're talking about a C chord and finding the fifth of the C chord, do we count from G or C? And the answer is we always count when we're working within the world of a chord. We always count from the root of that chord. So if we're in G and we're building a G chord, the root is going to be the same of both the key that we're in and the chord that we're building. So that's easy. But if we're building a G chord, or a D chord or an E chord, we have to count off those notes. So that's where knowing your major scales or having access to the major scales throughout this course is going to be helpful. Because if I ask you to build an F chord, an F7 chord, and tell you that of course the seventh is going to be flatted, you have to know what the flat 7 in the key of F is, and the way to do that is you got to go to your F major scale, find the 7th degree, and then flat it. Rather than worrying about memorizing all 12 major scales, whether you know them or not, the beauty of this type of learning that we're going to be doing is that as we do it, you're just going to learn it without knowing that you learned it. So oddly enough, I never really learn scales as a kid because I was too in a hurry to play the good stuff, that I had no interest in scales. And with no one making me practice and no one making me practice anything specific, I really kind of got to do what I want up until a point, and I didn't want to do scales. And I found out that probably by the age of a pretty young age, I just knew the scales because you're working through different chords and keys and you're learning the literature and everything. So if we start building an A minor 7 chord, and we got to start talking about the A scale, and you just got to Google what's an A major scale or ask Siri. That's a great thing. Siri will just tell you. So you'll memorize it in good time. But just keep in mind that as you build a chord, you're always going from the root of the name of the chord that you're building. But we're working in the greater solar system of the key of G. So we also kind of refer back to that too. So I hope that helps. All right. Let's see. It looks like that's the questions I've got so far. Anybody else have any questions? Christian, I see you there. I know you came down to Jazz Texas a lot of times. I always talked about how much you wanted to play piano like me. So what's your question, Christian? And we'll have more fun times down at Jazz Texas to come. Don't worry. Do you have any other tips for building unique and spicy chords? I have many tips, and I'm going to show all of them to you. For the time being, the most important thing you can do is get really comfortable with those 2 chords, that G and that C chord. And if you've already got them mastered and you're playing them in your sleep and you're bored of them, don't worry, because it's Wednesday night, and in less than 48 hours, I'm going to give you some new chords, and we're going to get into the blues. Towards the end of the course, you're gonna find that you're gonna be building some really spicy chords, and I'm gonna show you how to get there. I don't want to give away too much about what we're going to talk about Friday, but Friday you will have some very spicy chords, and I don't want you to freak out when you see them, because I am going to show them to you on the page because you need to see them. Don't have a panic attack when you see them, but you're going to love them. I promise. They're like some of my favorite chords of all time. Yes, Scott, one step at a time. Yeah. So much of this course for me has been, let's see, beyond the theory and chords, are there any playing techniques that are important to practice for playing good jazz? I mean, any kind of piano technique or whatever your instrument is technique. And so I gained almost all of my technique from classical music, which made it pretty easy to transition to jazz from a technical sense, because I already had the chops. But just repetition and playing, listening is going to be really important. And jazz musicians get way too caught up in arguing about what is swing. You hear jazz musicians talking about a really swinging band, and they'll say, "Hey, man, you're really swinging," and that's a good thing. And no one knows quite what it means. And they argue about musical notation of how do you notate swing and everything. But the way that we're going to do it is not to get bogged down in that. I'm gonna play stuff for you, and I want you to play along with me, and I want you to copy the things that I'm doing. And then when I remove myself from the equation, so like if I give you a recording and ask you to play along on a blues tune, and it's me and Mike and Brandon, I want you to copy me, and then I want you to do the next track, which is going to be Mike and Brandon and not me. So listening is the most important thing. Duke Ellington said that was the most important thing he always looked for in a cat was, do they know how to listen? And as we go through this, make sure you're really listening to the way that we're playing things and copying us and playing along that way. And you're going to find that the technique for doing that just develops as you do it. Any great comp musicians or albums we should listen to? Yeah, what I would do is, as you learn this music, and as I was learning this music, I just thought, how can I make the most use of every minute of the day to try and learn this music as fast as possible? And so I put on KRTU 91.7, which is a jazz station here in town, and I only listened to that station for probably a number of months, if not years. Listen to jazz music, and especially the music of Oscar Peterson. I'm going to put this in the comments so you remember it. Oscar Peterson. There's an album called Night Train. Also, listen to Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, because these guys were just some of the most classic, cool, swinging, bluesy jazz musicians that when I got into jazz, like that was what I wanted to do. I was not real impressed with like modern jazz and avant-garde jazz. I wanted to play that 50s, 60s kind of cool jazz where they're just like sizzling and you feel like you're down in a nightclub and everything. And so the more you put that on and you listen, it just kind of drips into your system. And then you just find that you're doing it and you don't even know what you're doing. But listening is everything. What is the best way I can better understand the numbers? 7th, 9th, 13. I sort of understand, but it moves so quickly, hard to follow. I'm finding that I have to pause and back up a few seconds. So first of all, that's okay. If you need to pause and back up a few seconds, that's totally fine, Scott. You're going to want to watch some of these videos probably multiple times. And the beauty of this is that we're going to be doing this every Wednesday night, and I'm here to help you along. And if you get a couple weeks behind, if you find that it takes you 3 weeks to get through the first weeks of lessons to where you feel comfortable going on, then that's totally fine. But my biggest encouragement to you would be move on before you think you're ready. Because I just found, and this is a personal thing, but I've also read so many things about it, that learning happens in an environment that's fun and that's stimulating and positive, but it also happens in an environment where you're a little bit uncomfortable. It's like when you see the guy at the gym and he's there every single day for the last 5 years, and you're there and he's like doing stuff, and he doesn't get any he's like doesn't get any stronger, he doesn't look any better, and you're like, man, 5 days a week, 5 years, and it's because he's not pushing himself to in that sort of that top comfort zone where like growth really happens. And so if you're like, man, like I feel like I got 80% of this, but there's 20% that's confusing, I would encourage you to just move through, because as you do it and as we talk about it, it's going to start to make sense. Now, to your specific question about scale degrees and the 9th and 13. So the way that you find scale degrees is whatever key we're talking about. So we're in the key of G. Last Friday, we're going to be in the key of G for a few more weeks, and that's where we're going to live, and you're going to get so used to the key of G. So starting on G, that's number 1. G is going to be your first scale degree because you're in the key of G. That's your home base. Now, if you're in the key of C, C is 1. And if you're wondering, what does it mean we're in the key of G? Don't even worry about it. Just trust me, we're in the key of G. So G is 1, and then A is 2. B is, I can't make 3 fingers with my left hand. That's why I keep doing it. 3 is, I don't know why. 3 is B. 4 is C, right? So you just count. It's just like steps. And then once you get to F, whether it's sharp or natural or flat or natural, that's 7. And then you have to start over because the next note is G. That's 8. So there's only 7 notes. But the way that chords are made, if you just press down all 7 notes at a time, it sounds terrible. The way that you make chords is you leave space. So you play 1, and then you leave out 2, and then you play 3, and you leave out 4. So just imagine all 7 of those notes together are way too crowded. So you got to leave some space. You got to let some air in. So you leave out every other note, and that gives you stacked thirds. So you go from G to B to D to F, and then to A, which is your 9th, C, which is your 11th, and then E, which is your 13th. So that's how you find 1 through 7, and then just leave out every other note, and you get thirds, and then that's how we build our chords. Left hand is, let's see, Rudy. Left hand is G chord, F, B, E, C chord, F, B flat, G, D. Right hand, A, D, G, can be C sharp, G chord. Right hand, A, D, G, I'm not sure what that last piece means there, Rudy, but the C sharp, the reason that I use that C sharp, if that's what you're asking about, is that's where you get that little crunchy sound. It's not part of the chord, but you just sort of just plunk it real fast. And the best way is to, by the way, for next time, I will have a downward facing cam on my keys so I can demonstrate this for the live Q&A. Press both the C sharp and the D at the same time, and then let go of the C sharp so you're left with just the D. You just want like a little bit of that C sharp in your world. It's like a pinch of just the most, spicy thing, and you don't want too much. So it's not part of the chord, but throw it in there. And you're going to find that as we build chords and you want something to sound jazzy, that's just a trick. You just grab a black key from somewhere and you can kind of just throw it in there. It's like you just create a little dissonance just to sort of show that that you can, and it creates a little spice in the chord. Let's see here. All right, anybody else? For the G scale, then you use F instead of F sharp. Why? So that was number one rule when we're talking about our mother scale, like the mothership scale, is that our seventh we're going to assume is flatted, and really, I'm going to explain it in just a minute. But don't worry too much about why. Just get used to that, because that's where we're going to start. So if I say, and this is actually true, Scott, not only in jazz, but also in blues, in contemporary pop music, and rock and roll. If someone says a G7 chord and you play a G chord that has an F sharp, it's going to be wrong. I don't know exactly where that lingo, I don't know when it started, but to refer to a seventh chord without qualifying it, like saying what kind of seventh chord it is, if you just say G7 chord, that implies the flat seven. And another word that people will use when they want to be really specific to make sure that you understand that is the word dominant. They'll say play a G dominant seventh chord, but usually, like, you don't really need to say that. So sometimes, like if you're in a discussion, like in a rehearsal with a band, and you're talking about, a lot of times jazz musicians, they won't have, even a chart with them. They'll just sort of tell you what the tune is, and they'll be like, there's a C major 7 and then a G7, and someone would say, is that a dominant 7? And they say, yeah, it's dominant 7, just to clarify. So that's if someone wants to be like, to make sure that you understand that it's a G with a flat 7, but it gets kind of, it wears you out to have to say the word dominant so many times that if you just tell them it's a G7 chord, just automatically assume that the seventh is flat. And what you're going to see later on is if I want you to play a G7 chord with a sharp 7, like with the seventh of the major scale, I will say play a G major 7 chord. And so G major 7 chord implies that you're using that F sharp. But if I don't say anything, if I just say G7, just assume, unless I tell you otherwise, always assume that the seventh is going to be flat. And I will always tell you when it's not. And that's not just me. That's you'll find that in any jazz group, in any blues group. All right. Anybody else? I'm really excited to see, looking at just everyone taking this course, that we have some classical college professors in classical piano. We have some beginners. We have some guitar players who are working this stuff out on piano. And I told you in some of the introductory material, and I feel even more confident today, that the beauty of this approach and of learning this music is that you can learn to do this at your level. You can be in the same classroom. You can be a beginner and be in the same classroom with a Van Cliburn competition winner and come at this music from the same place, and it's going to work. It might be, certain things might be harder for others, but it's totally, it works. Oh, thank you, Tonio. Doc, just want to say I think it's really cool you're doing this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Yeah, guys, I'm here to help you through this stuff. and I'm going to keep throwing stuff at you. Some of you might be feeling like this course is moving too slow, but remember, this is only week 1. We got 8 weeks to go, and I'm going to keep throwing stuff at you. Don't worry if you feel behind. Just keep moving through, and 10 years from now, this course material is still yours, so you can always refer back to it. And these live Q&As will be recorded and archived in the dashboard, so you can always come back and watch them. And we're going to, over time, break out specific questions and create like a Q&A knowledge base, to where if someone's already asked this question, you can find my answer. And so yeah, right-hand chord, Rudy, C or G, D, G. That's correct. And now if you go to your dashboard and you go through the course material, click on the recap video, scroll down, and you will find that PDF with those chords printed out. There's going to be more. There will be more chord printouts on Friday as we get into more material. But I'm going to try and give you as few of those as humanly possible, because I really want you to learn this stuff through doing it and not just looking at the page. And so much of this, I talked about this earlier. I've taken a number of conversational language courses and have been so amazed at the efficacy of some and the lack of efficacy of others, depending on how the courses are taught. I've studied French and Russian from textbooks. I'm not good at it. I wish I were, but I've wasted so much time studying language in textbooks, where it's like, okay, once you understand all this stuff, then now it's time to find your way to the bathroom. And you're like, geez, I've been at this for 3 months and now I'm only just finding the bathroom. And some of the language CD programs, where they just like throw you into the deep end, and you're like, I don't even know why I put this word over here. And then as you do it, you start to understand it, but you're always in a very uncomfortable spot. And I found that it was dangerous to drive many times when I was taking some of those courses, because they're always throwing you like a left-hand turn, and they'll have you ask your way to the bathroom in French 10 times in a row, to where you're like, yeah, I got it. And then 10 minutes later, after they've talked about baseball, they say, how do you find your way to the bathroom? And you realize, oh shoot, I don't got it. And so then they keep going and they keep circling back and like making you just a little bit dizzy the entire time. And that's where learning happens. And so that's what I want to do with you guys. And so I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you Friday. Just go after it. Make lots of mistakes. Try and have fun. By Friday, you will be playing the real jazz blues, just like I play it with my band guys, and you'll be playing along with Mike and Brandon on the bass and drums. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to show you that stuff and talk about the blues. Man, like, if you want to get me really fired up, just ask me to talk about the blues, because it's greatest song form of all time. I wish I could see you guys, but I know you're there. All right, any final questions before we say goodnight? All right. Well, thanks, you guys. Thank you for sticking with me. Thanks for taking the course. It's going to be a lot of fun. Nope. All right, Scott, thank you. Are you wearing pants? I don't know. Am I? We'll have more questions next week for sure. All right, Tonio. Guys, thank you. This video will be up on the site tomorrow, so you can refer back to it. And I'll see you next Wednesday. And look out for the new material on Friday. All right? Rudy, no, you cannot. You have to wait a whole week between material. Because here's the deal. If I just do a course dump on everybody, then I think the tendency is always to just sort of skim and sort of breeze through and hurry. Take your time, have fun with the 2 chords you got. I promise you'll have plenty to work on in less than 2 days. So, all right, I'll see you guys Friday and next Wednesday. Thanks, y'all. Good night.